We are so very honored today to have been given the very first exclusive televised video interview with the top-selling book, Letter to My Black Sons, written by Dr. Karsonya Whitehead. Dr. Whitehead, thank you so very much for welcoming CIVILRIGHTSAGENDA-COM into your life, into your space at this time, which I know is very busy, as your book was just released. I want to say, was it Tuesday?
It was just released on Tuesday.
Just released on Tuesday.
Yes.
Today is January 31st.
Yes, can you believe it's only been a couple of days?
I can't.
It's really doing very well.
I can't. To My Black Sons. Dr. Whitehead, why this book?
Well, this book is one I've been wanting to write for the last 14 years. I have been writing my son's letters, poetry, notes on a post-it. I've written letters on the back of menus when we go out to eat. I talk about how I've actually gotten up in the middle of the night and I'll go in and I'll put a note in my makeup on the vanity mirror so I can remind myself of what I want to say. When I first found out I was pregnant with my older son, I didn't know if I wanted to be a mommy. I knew that I wanted children, but wanting children and wanting to be somebody's mommy, that was a huge moment for me. And that's kind of the beginning of my journey, because I remember getting up at night for the third time in one night, and this is the first letter in the book, and I'm sitting in the bathroom on the floor. It's about 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'm writing on the back of this Chinese menu a letter to this child that I do believe I'm pregnant with. I had not taken a pregnancy test. I could not confirm it. But I knew I was up for the third time. I was nauseated. I wasn't feeling very well. And I was angry that this child was already, as I say in the book, bending my will to suit their needs. And it began from there. And I have over 30 journals. I have 4 or 5 huge folders full of papers and menus. I have 10 notebooks of material that I've been writing to them. So I pulled out a few to just try and see if I wanted to have them published. I've been asked already, and it's only been a couple of days, but I've been asked about Letters to My Black Sons too. Am I planning to do a follow-up? Someone said, if you have 30 journals, where's the rest of the material? And that's what I'm thinking about. How do I come back again and talk about my sons? But really, when I talk about my sons, I'm really talking about all black boys and even all white boys and all Asian American boys. What does it mean to mother someone and to want to pour everything you have into that person because you believe that there's something special there? The next book I think will be out in a couple of years, but I would like to hopefully document my older son's journey through teenagehood. And that's what's happening now. This book stops when he turns 14, which he did, January 11th, so that was the end. But now I'm writing about some of his experiences just in the last couple of weeks of being a teenager, calling a girl for the first time, having his first father-son coffee, to talk about marriage. But it's just amazing to be at this next stage. And I think there's a part of the book where I tell my sons, I thank them for their childhood. And I thank them for choosing their father and I to be their parents. And I thank them for always being fully present in our lives. And I think that we have to recognize that, as Sweet Honey in a Rock once said in a song, based upon a poem, of course, that our children are not our children. They are the sons and the daughters of life's longing for itself. And recognizing that they come through us, but they are not of us. They belong to themselves.
Absolutely. And so we certainly look forward. I mean, if Letters to My Black Sons too is half
thank you.
as powerful and thought-provoking and empowering as Letter to My Black Sons that we're holding today, then the world is truly going to be blessed with. You are an accomplished author. Tell me about these books behind us.
Okay. The first one, and I'm going to take them off and kind of put them back on. The first one is Notes to a Colored Girl, The Civil War Pocket Diaries of Emily Frances Davis. It came out last year, May of 2014. And this is based upon 3 years' worth of diaries written by a free black woman from, of course, 1863 to 1865. Emily Frances Davis was freeborn. She lived in Philadelphia. She was a seamstress and a domestic, and she wrote over 30,000 words documenting her everyday lived experiences. Her words had never been published or transcribed. So when my book came out, it was the first time that the world had actually been able to read about the lives of what I call this everyday free black woman. Henry Louis Gates writes one of the blurbs on the back, and he talks about how this book here sets the scene for a free black woman's experience. And he says in her entries, she writes, "Today has been a Memorial Day. I thank God I've been here to see it." And Henry Louis Gates says that he thanks God he was here to see this book being published. He called it a major contribution to African American literature. I have a quote here from Jelani Cobb, and he called this work "History at its most democratic and scholarship at its most vital." This book just won the 2014 Letitia Woods Book Brown Award for the best edited book in African American history for 2014. So this is kind of my life's work. Emily, which I talk about actually in Letters to My Black Sons, that Emily is the fourth child that sat at our table. She went with us on every summer vacation. She was at every funeral, every graduation, and that the struggle to get this book was a struggle that my family went through together. Mm-hmm. So that's this one. Next to it, over here, which is interesting, I had this idea that I wanted teachers to be able to use my notes book in their classroom. I'm a former classroom teacher, and I wanted to make it easy for them and accessible. So I had this idea to publish on the heels of notes what I call Rethinking Emily Frances Davis, lesson plans for teaching her Civil War pocket diaries. And I invited teachers and professors from around the country to read my book and to submit a lesson plan for how they would teach it. So I have things in this anthology as well. I have lesson plans. I have an article in here. And everyone from a professor of history at Exeter to a professor at CCBC contributed. And this is really for teachers, for moms who are homeschooling their children, for anyone who's looking for a way to talk about the experience of a free black woman and what that must have been like for her. One of my contributors kind of draws a parallel between Emily's pocket diaries and today's tweets, and how she's really the first tweeter who was insta-famous, but she kept this work. So this book actually came out in November of 2014, so right on the heels of the notes book.
Wow.
And then finally, this is Carter G. Woodson. It's called Sparking the Genius. In 2013, at the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, Carter G. Woodson's company, and Carter G. Woodson, of course, is the founder of Negro History Month that became Black History Month, Negro History Week, that became Black History Month. And his organization, ASALA, which is celebrating 100 years this year, they selected me to do the Woodson Lecture. It was really a huge, huge deal for me as a young historian to be chosen to give this foundational lecture. I had worked with ASALA. They invited me to the White House in 2013 and in 2014 to present on President Obama's White House Black History Month panels, and then to have me do the Woodson Lecture. The lecture really struck a chord with people, because in the lecture I talk about how can we spark the genius in young people. What does it mean to set them on fire and set them loose into the world, to help them to believe that they can do something different and something more with their life. And because so many people were struck by it, I decided to publish it as a book, and I invited an author to write a lesson plan how do you teach this in your classroom,
Mhm.
but also the ways in which this gets at the heart of critical pedagogy.
Mhm.
Yes, so that's really, these are my 4 books, and now that Lessons to My Black Sons has come out, I do have a new book that's coming out in November called The Emancipation Proclamation, Race Relations on the Eve of Reconstruction, that's coming out through Routledge. And then I have an encyclopedia series coming out in 2017 through ABC Clio called The 50 Key Events That Shaped African American History.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. Certainly looking forward to that. As an award-winning author, Doctor of Philosophy, and you have a passion to educate. And you mentioned that you had numerous journals, numerous notebooks. You wrote things down, and you touch on that in the book. What was it that inspired you to actually write things down, to actually write your thoughts?
I have always recorded my thoughts. I've been keeping journals probably since I was 11 or 12 years old. I have all of my journals. And I talk in the opening statement to the book, the one where I write kind of an open letter to the boys about my reasons behind why I actually recorded their stories. And I talk about how when I was younger and I would write in my journals, and I would write at the front of every one of my journals, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray to God my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, burn my journal before my mommy takes. Because I was always afraid that my mother and my father would find my journals, would read them, and look to use my pain, my life, my secrets against me. But I recorded everything. Whether I spent time trying to learn Russian, and I was writing everything in Russian, or I was in Kenya and I wrote everything in Swahili. But my journal has always been a constant. Sometimes I wonder, what is the question that I'm seeking to answer with my life? I believe that we all have this kind of big question, and that all the work that we do is just variations of that answer that we're seeking. And it seems like in all of my work, some of the constant themes that have shown up, really about my relationship with my father, and how important he was in my life, and how important he is in my life. He's still alive. My relationship with my mother and with my grandparents. That seems to be this driving force behind me, and this desire to want to share this with the world. Maybe I'm seeking answers around what it means to be a black woman in America, and how we have been told in so many ways that our past is not rich enough, it's not significant enough, and I'm seeking to show something different, that my parents did for me what I'm attempting to do for my sons, and that is tell the stories, document them.
You mentioned in the book that your grandmother would ask you, or she told you, write it down so that I can know. Write it down so when I think, were you about to travel?
I was getting ready to go to Kenya. I was going to do the Crossroads Africa program in Kenya. I was a student at Lincoln University, and they sent, 2 students per summer abroad, and I had decided to stay. So when everybody was going to come back, I was going to stay and work in Kenya. And I don't know, I told my father I was going to go find myself, and he said, why do you have to find myself? Find yourself on my dime. There should be a cheaper way where you can find yourself. But they supported me. They supported this journey, and my grandmother, my grandma Reds, which is my father's mother, told me to go, write it down, and remember so I can come back and tell her, which is the same thing my grandma Nana said, which is my mother's mother. You've got to remember, black women, we've been holding up the world for so long. You need to go do that. Go hold the world up and change it, and find ways to be who you are. And that was very interesting to me, to spend a year away from them. I have traveled a lot. I think I actually mentioned in the book that I traveled for the first time when I was, in 6th grade. My parents sent me to Canada. So that they started this journey, this long-term journey for me of trying to figure out where I fit in and where is my story.
And you're born in South Carolina?
Columbia, South Carolina.
You talk about the Civil Rights Movement.
Yes. My father was very actively involved in the civil rights movement. We were in Columbia, South Carolina. He worked with the NAACP. He worked with SNCC. He would go to the movement, and he would come home and talk about it. And I was born in '68, so by the time my father was well into the movement, you're talking, 72, 73, 74, when I was really 5 and 6 years old, and it was still kind of this lingering feel of what does it mean to be black and to be free, right? We had come, years after Brown v. Board, which was 1954. You had that whole period of time when you had black people seeking to force this country to live up to this promissory note that Dr. King talks about, right? That we have this check that we're waiting to be cashed. It hasn't been cashed yet. You signed the check, and the signing of the check, of course, was the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, was the Voting Rights Act, was the Civil Rights Act. You signed the check. Like you said, we're free and equal, but you're not giving us free and equal access to everything that this country has to offer. So my father would talk about this, and he would wrestle with these ideas over the dinner table. We didn't have a television, and so he would spend time on Saturdays talking about the movement, and he just made it sound so exciting, and so wonderful. It sounded like family, like a huge, big family reunion. And I remember when I had my first protest. It was in 1989, and Virginia Beach is where African American students used to go for spring break. So white students would go to Florida, and black students would go to Virginia Beach. And so we had heard in 1989, I just plus my sorority, that Virginia Beach was closed. They were closing the beach where we could not go. And so we were going to protest, and this is long before the internet. So we're faxing notes back and forth between all the historically black colleges saying, we're going to meet in Virginia Beach. You cannot close a beach. You just can't do that. I remember going down there, and there was all this activity, and people were being arrested, myself included. And I remember calling my father. I'm like, I'm kind of scared down here. I don't know what's going on. And this is not how you described it. And he said, no, it's how I described it. It's not how you heard it. You heard that the movement was just about singing and being together. And going to prison because guys were going to be there. He said, but the movement is hard, and it's scary, and it's dangerous. And if this is something you believe in, then are you willing to die for it? And if you are, then you have to be willing to go the long haul. It means you don't call me when you get afraid. It means you stand, and you stand solid on what you believe in.
And one thing, a theme that runs constant through in your book, Letters to My Black Sons, is how, and there's a mantra, I guess, that, even I adore, which is that the movement never dies.
Yes.
The struggle never dies. And you talk about that in the book. In the book. And when, again, we look at your cover, Letters to My Black Sons, Raising Boys in a Post-Racial America. And then you turn these pages and you're blown away by, okay, this woman is talking about how not only her father was engaged in the civil rights movement, as you just mentioned, how you yourself, you're a civil rights activist, award-winning, of course, author, and a constant theme, and I think it starts, I started to see it when you talked about your grandmother Nana. Pass it for me a little.
Sure. So I'm talking, her nickname was Reds because she had blazing red hair. But she seemed to always be in motion, even when she was standing still. She was a big woman, but she walked very lightly, almost as if she was gliding across the floor. I used to go fishing with her, though I knew she did not like to take me. I talked too much and had too many questions. She liked to just sit in silence and wait for something to happen. Black people, she used to say, have been waiting all their lives for something good to happen. If they can wait for freedom to come, then surely I can wait on some fish to bite.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Much later in the book, we get to, again, you mentioned Reds, your Nana, and the outrage really, that you felt regarding, I guess there was some type of work done by Russell Simmons
Page
on Harriet.
57.
Page 57.
Reds could have been Harriet.
Reds could have been Harriet. Could you share with us?
I sure will. Russell Simmons, last summer, 2013, he financed this television show that portrayed Harriet Tubman as an ingenue. She was having sexual relations with the plantation owner. She was negotiating her freedom and the freedom of others based upon sexual favors. To watch Harriet Tubman, and I say that in quotations, as an actress portraying Harriet Tubman, as someone who would negotiate freedom in exchange for sexual favors, and to see her actually engaged in, of course, we know it's simulated, but it's engaged in the act of having sex with the plantation owner, and hearing him say things to her like, I know where you're going, and she's like, I know you know I'm free, but it was very disturbing, and the community across the board completely outraged. Well, Harriet Tubman's great-great-grandniece reached out to me and said, I know that you have a blog, a very active blog. I would like to do an open letter on your blog. I read your Reds Could Have Been Harriet's story, and it touched me. And so when I put up that open letter from Harriet Tubman's great-great-grandniece responding to Russell Simmons because she read my blog about how I felt about Harriet Tubman, to me that was kind of a full circle. I was like, Harriet Tubman's great-great-grandniece reached out to me because she read my blog about me talking about my grandmother and how my grandmother could have been Harriet. My grandmother could have been Moses. And then this story here, this letter, it's just all about my outrage about Russell Simmons, but even more importantly, I talk about Harriet Tubman and my childhood myths and legends, and how I used to pretend to be Harriet Tubman at Reds' farm. And I was 8 years old, and I used to go down to the water to think. Whenever we would get in trouble, my grandma Reds would send us down to the water to think. And I don't know, I'm not sure exactly how much property. I think it was maybe 7 or 8 acres, maybe 10 acres. And her farm sat at the top, and there were all these woods. There was a path through the woods, and at the base of the woods, there was a lake, and that's where she would go fishing. If you got in trouble, you had to walk down to the lake, and you had to go down, and you had to sit and think. And so the times when she would make me walk back from the lake, and she would blindfold me, because she was like, you know, there's nothing worse than being lost on your own land. You should be able to find your way back. Reds was an amazing woman. And just teaching me about patience, teaching me about painting. I remember she, you know, the first and only time I've ever shot a rifle was when Reds was teaching me how to shoot a pig. She's like, we're going to have a pig for dinner. I'm like, which pig? I love the pigs. She's like, oh, they're food. Like, they are not here to be your friend. And so she took me out with her to shoot this pig. I'm telling you. Talk about traumatic, but like having her, you know, show me how to hold the rifle. I'm like, we're blowing the pig away, which was later dinner, right? And she's like frying up the ears. But Rez was just amazing. So when I got in trouble, she said, go down and think, go by the water. And she would stand at the front door of her house, and she would yell out, just because you can't see me doesn't mean I can't see you. Get yourself down to the water and think. Well, on the way, I would pretend to be Harriet Tubman. I would grab a stick, and I felt like I was, you know, leading people to freedom and making our way through. And that's what that story is about, and how my grandmother, and I'll just read this little section here, Reds could have easily been a Moses. She taught me how to fish, shoot pigs, garden, climb trees, fight my male cousins, and paint. She would tell me that Anderson women never lose because they were born fighters and winners. When she took me